Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Spotlight with Scientists in School. And today I am so thrilled. I'm joined by Maddy Bolt, who has quite the resume. Hello, Maddy. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
This is very exciting. Maddy, I have you down as a surfer, an educator, a sailor, very cool, a scientific author, a dive instructor, and a marine biologist. That's pretty amazing. I don't know how you fit it all in.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a go-getter, I would say. Always been very determined. I love everything about the ocean, and like seeing it in a holistic way is super important to me. And I mean, I wouldn't call myself a marine biologist because I don't technically have a PhD, but I did study it in my undergrad and have literally breathed everything about the ocean since I can remember. So
Okay, so let's
yeah.
start at the beginning. Did you always like science when you were a young kid?
Totally. Like I love science before I even really knew that that's what it really was. When I was really young, we had a cottage in Anishinaabe territory, so in on like Lake Huron, and I spent all my summers, looking for frogs and collecting ladybugs and swimming and just really observing. And I feel like at our core, we are all observers. We're taking in everything that we see, and I feel like if you can really cultivate that as a kid and as a child and really instill that creativity and that observing nature, that's like everyone's a little scientist. And so I really loved exploring and just kind of taking in the world around me when I was a kid for sure.
Now, you grew up in Toronto, but what took you to BC? I know there's lots of reasons why we would want to go to British Columbia. What took you there?
I think I wanted something different. I obviously grew up in a landlocked city, and that just
Mhm.
goes to show that it doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you are passionate about the ocean, you can definitely incorporate it and move towards it as you grow. My family is from South Africa, and so we spent a quite a few vacations visiting, and I was introduced to the ocean there. And I remember seeing a seal for the first time. Like it's ingrained in my memory. I remember seeing a seal for the first time riding one of the waves, and I was like, it just felt so magical to me. And I was like, okay, this is what I want to do, and I want to study it, and I want to just be completely immersed in it. And I knew that UBC had a really amazing marine biology program. I knew there was a lot of work out there that they did with whales and seals, things like this. And so that's what drew me to BC.
You mentioned growing up in a landlocked city, and that was going to be one of my questions. If there's a kid out there that's really interested in marine life and the oceans, but they find themselves in a landlocked city, what opportunities are out there for them?
So there's the first thing I want to say is like, that's so exciting that you know what you want to do and you know what you're passionate about. That's awesome. And there are so many opportunities. I think that a lot of times you'll hear, oh, like it's so competitive. It's so hard to become a marine biologist. Everyone wants to do it. But what I say is that everyone hears that, so nobody really tries. So then the amount of people actually going to do that is a lot less. And at the end of the day, if you're passionate about something, there's always a way that you can incorporate that and work towards that. So I think that a really good place to start if you are in a landlocked city is at a local aquarium. Obviously, you want to be making sure that this aquarium is education focused. It's not, doing anything that's unethical, something that you wouldn't really agree with, like holding, bigger cetaceans or something like this. But if it's an educational aquarium and they're really focused on inspiring and educating people, that could be a really awesome opportunity. And you can always start by volunteering there. Or, if there's something you want to develop, like you want to learn how to, identify corals or take photographs of animals, you can go towards them and tell them this and say this thing you want to work on, and then interact with aquariums in that way. There are also so many online internships nowadays, and
Hmm.
depending on your age group or your competency, you can totally engage with these online internships. I know there's a bunch of Facebook groups that you can join if you just search up, marine biology internships and volunteer opportunities, things like that, just to get your foot in the door. And there's things from, you can do online identification. So if there's a scientist who's studying maybe, for example, the prevalence of a certain type of fish species in an underwater habitat, and they have a bunch of photos, they might need someone to go through them and be like, okay, there's a fish, this fish species here, and then there's two in this photo and three in this photo, and something like that would be a really good opportunity as well.
What would you say, or how would you describe a day in the life of a marine biologist? I think kids all are fascinated with the ocean, and we think that's really a great job. But what is it like? What does it entail?
So, I mean, I can only speak to what I experienced during my degree because I am not, pursuing a PhD at this moment in marine biology. But during my degree, I worked with a lot of marine biologists and I was a research assistant and things like this. So, a day in the life of a marine biologist is super dynamic and you do some research in the field. So maybe you're working with the species that you're learning about, and that can be anything from a seal to a whale to a tiny little algae or a little cyanobacteria or a little, um, mollusk, anything really, or to even sort of more chemical things you could be working with if you're studying ocean acidification or climate change, things like that. So you could be doing research in the field or in the laboratory if you're looking more at, isotopes or, chemical analysis of certain things, or if you're even analyzing like little otoliths, so fish ear bones to see what those guys are up to. So you'd be doing research in the field and in the laboratory, and then there's a lot of writing papers. So if you are a scientist, you're going to have to love writing, you're going to have to love reading, but it is really rewarding. And if I think at your core, if you are a curious person, you would love marine biology because that is essentially what you're going to be doing every day is identifying questions, answering them and learning from them, and then identifying more questions from the answers to those questions.
Right, right. So you must have had a childhood where you were always in the water, though, right?
I think, I mean, so at my cottage for sure, in Anishinaabe territory, I spent a lot of time swimming and I was on my school swim team. And like, that's another way you can interact with, with water. If you aren't really near an ocean, you can join your swim team or something like this. And I'm sure there's lakes around and there's people who dive in lakes and snorkel and things like that. So I started off like, just snorkeling in lakes. We had shipwrecks all in Lake Huron in Anishinaabe territory that we would go and visit and snorkel. And like, I was terrified. Like, I don't want kids to be like, I'm terrified of the ocean. I can never study it. Like, I was terrified of water when I was younger, but I loved it. It was more of like a respect. And I just remember it was like this big, intriguing thing I wanted to know more about. And I think it had a lot of mystery.
Mm,
And so I was really intrigued by that. And yeah, I just kind of started off swimming and
yeah.
little baby steps. You don't have to jump in and be like a master scuba diver right away. Baby steps, you got to be easy on yourself. Anything new that you try is going to be daunting at first. And I think it's just like that feeling of vulnerability when you're in the ocean, but
Yeah.
you do really get used to it. Like I used to be scared, swimming in the open ocean. And now as a dive instructor, I'd have to be the first one to jump in the water
Right.
and, not seeing any land around and have to check it out. And sometimes I see sharks and things like that. And you get used to it. So there's,
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
progress for sure.
Absolutely. Now, with all your experience, you must have a favorite species, marine species, something you see in the ocean that you love.
I've been really grateful. I've been able to see a lot of different species. I'm really grateful to my dad too. He was my dive buddy, bringing me
Oh,
on dives when we were younger. And I remember we went on a dive in Hawaii once on in around Molokini, and we heard whales singing underwater.
oh,
And
wow.
for me, it was such a amazing experience. And I think really since that, humpback whales have been my favorite species. They're just so smart. They
Hmm.
have an immense culture. They have amazing migrations up and down coasts, and they're just beautiful.
And where do you think marine biology is headed in the future?
Mm. I mean, with climate change
Hmm.
becoming a very impending issue, I think we are going to be moving towards how climate change is affecting our oceans
Right.
and moving towards solutions in that regard for sure. I think that there's a lot of interesting work being done right now with coral propagation and ocean acidification, as well as fisheries management. Fossil fuels is obviously the biggest issue, and following, with habitat loss and biodiversity issues and overfishing, things like that. So there's so much that the oceans are struggling with right now. And I think that that will present an immense opportunity for people in our generation to work at creating innovative solutions for that. So that's where I think that marine biology is headed in the future.
Yeah. And what if kids or classrooms are interested in learning more about climate change in the oceans?
Mm.
Anything you can recommend?
Yeah, I mean, first off, like to really engage people's curiosity, you can always look at there's so many documentaries, even on like on Netflix, things like that are super educational. And just to get like a basis, because if you watch a documentary like that, it'll go over all these different sorts of ecosystems within the ocean. So kelp forests, Arctic ecosystems, coral reefs, open oceans, things like this. And there's different challenges for each different environment. So get them to watch a video like that, get them to watch a documentary. And if there's a specific ecosystem they're interested in, there's an immense plethora of resources that that they can study from within that ecosystem. And stuff like National Geographic Kids has a lot of resources as well that help explain climate change and things like that in a kid-friendly way. And I mean, I make my own little nature guides that talk about climate change for sure that I use with teachers. But there's so much content going on right now. And I also really encourage, if you're a parent or a teacher or even a kid, to look at Indigenous knowledge and traditional ecological knowledge, because there's thousands and thousands of years of knowledge that explains and can speak to climate change and how our habitat has changed as well.
You talked a little bit about guides. You just kind of mentioned it a bit. Why don't we jump into what you're doing right now? You're doing some pretty amazing work with nature folks. Tell me about this.
Thank you. Yeah, so I actually started Nature Folks maybe a few months ago, but I kind of started it as a way of making environmental education more accessible. I was working with a lot of teachers in my previous job who really loved outdoor education and environmental education, but teachers are so busy. They're always in the classroom and they prioritize their students. They want to prioritize that time and that connection with students, and they might not always have the time to do all this research about a certain lesson or something like that. And I kind of thought, you know what, like teachers want to put their priority on their time with their students. They want to focus on that. How about I do the research? I get everything ready, get it all in line with the curriculum, make a nice little guide, turnkey, boop, everything is done for you. And you can go ahead and implement that in the classroom. And, all my lessons incorporate Indigenous knowledge. I make them accessible so they're scalable. So if you have learners from all different backgrounds, you have visual learners, auditory learners, kinesthetic learners, there's different options as well.
That's pretty amazing. The other thing I was really interested in reading is that you have this great idea of opening an outdoor adventure camp for girls. Tell
Mm-hmm.
me how that idea started and why that's an important project to you.
Yeah, I was offshore camping on this island in Tiliquit territory, so in near Tofino, BC, where I used to live. And I was just kind of doing a little soul searching, and I was like, what do I want to do with my life? At this point, I was like 23 years old, and I was just like, I have all these dreams, I have all these things that I love, and I want to make sure they can all connect. I
Right.
love empowering women or feminine identifying individuals. I love sailing, I love surfing, I love marine biology. I want to see if they can all connect into this beautiful, like, mishmash of something amazing. And I realized that a way that that could happen would be making an outdoor adventure camp. And so making a safe space in which women or femme people can come together, they can learn how to surf, they can learn how to sail and dive and snorkel and do that in a space that is safe and encouraging of them, because usually they may not get the same amount of opportunities as someone else. And so being able to create that really holistic and fun and safe environment and learning and empowering them and really instilling confidence. Like when you are learning to surf, it is just the most humbling experience ever, because it's so hard. And like you just have to
Yes.
completely realize that the power of the ocean, like she is
Yes.
in charge. You just gotta learn, and it's really a beautiful experience. And it's almost like a meditation, really. And when you see yourself improving, like that is so, so valuable and so empowering. And to be able to give that gift to people, I think would be so amazing. Same goes for sailing, same goes for
Right.
snorkeling. And through all that, that sort of connection with the ocean, like if you
Mhm.
can instill that in a child, like that will last them forever.
Okay, so you spend so much time out on the water. What do you do when you're not out on the water? What else do you do?
I love yoga. I love running. I love playing music. I think lately I've been feeling a lot more like I need to lean into my creative practices. So I'm a photographer and I have been leaning into that and just trying to create in all different sorts of ways, whether it's by writing songs or taking photographs or drawing or things like this. So I like to try and have that creativity in and out of the water, and just also just keeping my body healthy so that I can surf for as
Right.
long as I can. Like I'm gonna be a surfer until I'm like 75, 80 at least. So
I
I'm
stop
like,
at 80.
yeah, so I'm trying to do lots of yoga and things like that just to make sure that I can stay healthy.
Maddie,
Yeah.
you're so inspirational. I can't believe all the things you've done at such a young age. And I totally love your messaging about getting kids out there, getting them to fall in love with the ocean and try new things. So
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was so awesome to speak and connect with the community, and I'm happy to have met you.
thanks so much, Maddie.
Mhm.